Hey, everybody, it's Chris Elmore with another edition of the Service Contractor Radio Show, brought to you by Service Excellence Training, where we turn learning into earning. And this week, you're in for a treat because we have the man, the myth, the legend, affectionately known as T-Bear, Terry Barrett. And we're going to talk about probably one of the most controversial topics, probably when it comes to management. So stay tuned. Hey, Terry Barrett.
Hey, Chrissy.
So, look, man, everybody knows who you are by now. Here's what they know about you. They know three things about Terry Barrett.
He's good looking.
No, that's not on the list. No, here's what people know: three things about Terry Barrett. They know, one, he presents the absolutely fabulous tech program that we do live in Austin and absolutely crushes it. They know that. They know he synced it.
It's terrible.
And they know he hates hunting. Now, those are the three things that people that listen or watch this podcast know about Terry Barrett. But let me tell them some things that they don't know about Terry Barrett. And good looking is not on the list there either. just so you brought it up, just so you know, it's not on the list. Terry Barrett is one of the best men I know. Of all the people I've ever met, he's one of the best. He's a great father. He's a great husband, and he's gonna start crying in a minute. But that's okay, because Terry is also known for crying.
Yeah, true.
But he's also running a business there in Birmingham, or not Birmingham. I'm sorry. I know I just committed some sort of sin in Alabama.
Close. Montgomery.
I'm sorry. I'm going to let him tell you about that. But most of you know who Terry Barrett is, and we pick on him sometimes because we love him. But, Terry, just quick background on you.
Yeah. Main thing most people would probably want to know is, how I got where I'm at. And quickly, it's just I started out in sales, then became I also went over, learned the service side, then became as the company grew, service manager. Eventually, company continued to grow, so became general manager. So been doing that for quite some time, but father of 7 children and have a unbelievable, awesome wife of 25 years. So yeah,
nice.
Extremely happy about those.
How many grandkids you got now?
Well, we have 3 and 2 more in the oven that should be ready to peel on out soon. So I think March is the due date for both of the ones that we know about at the moment.
That's awesome. So that's understated, but that's Terry Barrett. That's who Terry Barrett is. So today we want to talk about performance pay and where this idea came from. I mean, we talked about it a bunch before, but we were having a team meeting the other, I guess it was Monday, and we do a huddle 4 days a week. So on Monday, we have a team meeting at 2, and we start that 2 o'clock meeting with a huddle. And our huddle lasts 15 minutes. And the 3 points in the huddle, if you're familiar with Dave Hyatt and the way he runs meetings, some others out there, the first 5 minutes is what's up. The second 5 minutes is KPIs. And the last 5 minutes are issues or bottlenecks that we talk about. And Terry brought up in his bottleneck performance pay and how some companies implement performance pay because they think that it's going to take the place of management. And when he said that, I'm like, I've been saying that for years and years myself because I've seen it, or in Terry speak, I synced it everywhere. And so I said, well, let's talk about it. Let's record it and let's talk about it. And so, Terry, give me your general overview of performance pay and what the definition of that is to you.
Yeah, and please, nobody think that Terry's not a fan of performance pay. I mean, that's not what we're saying at all. Matter of fact, we're on performance pay. Been on it for quite a while. I think it's a great thing. I wish, me personally, I love it. I mean, I love being paid for performing. So I guess my overview is it's hard for me to really give one because I think that what it should do is be a reward for your performers. that doesn't mean it has to be a penalty for somebody who maybe isn't up to someone else's level as far as performance. But I mean, there's some great things about it. I know we're going to talk about them, but there's also some negatives, and probably the biggest negative is how it's rolled out and how it's presented to the people, and then how it's almost used as just that, okay, I'm just going to constantly dangle that carrot. Well, eventually, I guess what I've seen, Chris, is, man, the culture, you can just destroy a culture if that's how it's used. So,
well, let's talk about that. Let's avoid some traps with performance pay, or I should say common mistakes with performance pay. And let's talk through about what we should consider before deciding performance pay is right for a department, an individual, or a company. Because I think that's where most people go wrong. And I think what happens is someone who's been around HVAC for how long now? How long have you been around it?
22 years.
Yeah. And so I've been around it for 30 some years, because I started, when I was a kid. But one of the things that I see is that people start performance pay for the wrong reasons. And one of the main reasons is, if they've been around a while, like you and me, we've been to a lot of conferences and conventions. We've read a lot of books from gurus in the industry, outside of the industry. We haven't just stuck to HVAC stuff. We've looked at plumbing and electrical and all these other things. And hey, that guy's doing it. He's successful. It must work. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. What's
he's
that?
A fan of, he's a fan of it. Basically, he's promoting it.
Absolutely.
And for some great reasons, but if you don't know the whole picture, then, how good's it going to be for you?
Yeah. And so the first thing is, we got to ask, what are you trying to accomplish with performance pay? And some of the things I look at is it a situation where you want to, on the positive side, you want to give your team more, but you can't just give them more hourly. The finances aren't there. Economically, it may not work like that. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to give them a way to earn more. So if they do more, they earn more, right? So if they do increase ticket average, they get more money. If they do sell more of these, they get more money. If they work more and they have more revenue coming in, they get more. So what are you trying to accomplish with that? The other side of it, and this is probably where we're going to end up a lot on performance pay, is a lot of people try to do it to control cost, mainly labor, right? And what happens if they've got a labor problem? And when I say labor, I mean, they've got a problem if they think, well, my guys are taking too long, or my people are taking too long. If I put in performance pay, that'll take care of it. Here's what I know, and see if this is the same with you. If you got a labor problem before performance pay, after performance pay, what are you going to have?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
You're going to have still a labor problem.
Exactly right. That's the thing. And I think that goes to your point earlier where you saying people put in performance pay sometimes. I have to admit that that's the most common reason I see it is, oh, yeah, they're taking this long, or my labor's too high. Well, I'm going to go to performance pay, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you also, I think you hit the nail on the head. So many, it worked for somebody else, or at least they're saying it's working for them. They're not, it's just like me when I'm teaching the tech class, good gracious. I mean, I think we have a sensational group of guys here at our company, but can I tell you something? It's not all perfect. I mean, there's days that I told you, we just have to go back to the basics. And that's the problem that happens is, so many times when they're in my class, we're talking about the positives. Well, the same thing when you're at that convention. They're telling you about the good things. And let's face it, some people, I think about it like the old bucket of crabs, whether it's a good bucket down there or not, you want other people in that bucket with you.
Yeah.
I mean, the crabs are trying to, you try to get out, they'll pull you back in there. And the problem, it's kind of like why. You may decide, okay, we just come through New Year's. So you may decide, you know what, I want to lose weight and get in better shape. But that may be different for you. You couldn't, your diet and my diet's probably not going to look the same.
I don't eat that much hard candy.
I know. And that's how you look better than me too. But
Stop. No way.
Your diet's working much better for you than me. But the challenge is it's not a one size fits all, and it's dang sure not a fix all.
I like that. It's not one size fits all, and you got to quote him verbatim. Dang sure not
easy
a fix all. No, I like that. That's true. And I think that's the way people approach it. So what you before you decide, you need to know, what are you trying to accomplish? And then what results do you expect? Because we can go back to the old basics on incentives. Whatever you incentivize is what you're going to get more of, right? Mm-hmm. And so be careful. What are you trying to get? Are you trying to get a higher average ticket? Or are you just trying to get more sales? Are you trying to get more membership sales? More lead turns for HVAC? What are you trying to get? Is there a specific type of work that you want to get more of? So understand what you're trying to accomplish. And if you go in, for instance, and you say, well, I'm going to go away from hourly completely, and I'm going to go with a percentage of revenue. Okay. So what are you going to get? More revenue. But what's going to happen to the time involved there? Yeah. Right. And again, there you go. There's that old thing coming back up. I said we come back to is if you incentivize more revenue, you'll get more revenue. But what if a guy was working, say, 45 hours a week to produce a certain amount, but now because he gets a percentage of the revenue, and even say you did some tests and you ran it and you said, okay, if he works 45 hours of hourly, this is what he gets. If he works 45 hours based on commission, this is what he gets. And even though the revenue may be the same, I think what you'll find is if you're not managing it, you had a problem with labor before. If you're not managing it after, you're going to have you're going to have the same problem, which is now you're going to get more revenue, but they're going to take longer to get you more revenue because they can. And so you just got to be careful what you expect to get from it. And yeah.
Chris, I was going to say, I was speaking with a owner just the other day, and he was asking me questions about bonus structure or whatever for his service department, for service leader, service manager. And, that's first thing, obviously me and you have to know what do you want? What are you wanting out of your service department? Because, you see some that say, what, I'm just going to bonus an example. And this kind of is exactly like performance pay. I mean, in this case, I'm going to give, a certain amount of bonus for all the revenue that comes from that department. Well, the challenge with that is if I were to do that, if I'm not careful, next thing you know, I got a bunch of parts being fixed or, things that are getting in the way of what we as a HVAC company truly want, which is replacements.
Right.
And that's not to say that there's not a mix of both, but if all I do is give an incentive for revenue from the repairs, well, I'm going to get more repairs.
You're going to get it. Exactly.
Unfortunately, on the other side, I'm not going to get what the company truly needs, some of also, which is replacement. So it has to, you got to clearly think that through of, okay, what am I trying to get? Because if we're not careful, we may get that, but what else did we get?
Yeah. And I got something written down here. So I know a lot of you who listen to this podcast or watch it may think, well, do they ever think about this stuff before they actually record it? And yes, we do. I actually have show notes here. And one of the things I wrote down, Terry, is right here. It says, be careful what you wish for.
Amen.
Right? And so we have to know what we want to get from it. And if we're not careful, we'll get exactly what we incentivize for sure. So we got to be careful on that. And here's another point that I see this causes performance pay to fail. And it causes people to look at performance pay and go, yep, I knew that wouldn't work for my company. Right? Because supposedly performance pay was the problem. But when you tell somebody, here's what I want you to accomplish. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish with performance pay is for you to do this or get this or whatever. Here's the results I want. But you don't have the opportunities for the results. That's a problem. One of the most common things I hear and as an objection for people to put in performance pay, well, I've got an advertised an hourly rate And if I advertise an hourly rate, and it's, let's say we're doing a hybrid plan and it's part hourly, part commission. Well, if I advertise that low hourly rate and well, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to advertise the best picture possible of what someone could make on performance pay. And I've seen these ads. I'm sure you have too.
Mm-hmm.
Earn up to $200,000 as a HVAC service tech, earn up to 150, 100, depends on your market. I know, but I've seen those ads before. I've known people that have run ads like that before. And the challenge with that is you have to have the opportunities for people to make that. And so one of the things I erased on my whiteboard before, and I probably should have left it up, but I was working with a client, and I don't want to say who it is because I don't want them to think they're people to hear it and go, oh no, we're doing this. We were just having a conversation about it. And so we went through and we looked, and here's one of the things I know, and I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of numbers and details, but what we know is a service technician in HVAC will do about 750 calls a year. Plumber about 600, electrician 400, 450, something like that. It may vary where you are, but that's about average. And so one of the benchmarks we use is about 10% of those calls we'd like to see come over as lead turns. That's minimum, wouldn't you say, Terry?
Yeah.
750 calls. I want 75 lead turns off those calls in a year, roughly. You may need more. You may want more. But it was funny because if we want that much in this particular case, and I find this a lot, the question is not how many you want to get off of 750. We know what we want to try to get. How many can you get? That's a question. And so I asked him, I said, so if your guys run 750 calls in a year, how many of those will be lead turn opportunities? He said about 20%. Now, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I think 10% is 50% of 20%, right? So that means his team has to turn a lead on half of their opportunities. That's pretty stout. That's a pretty tough number to hit. Can be done, but they didn't think that through in terms of, is it even possible for me to get to that result that I want, even with performance pay? Do I have the opportunities in place? Can I send the guy on 750 calls? So we got to make sure we have the opportunities, or it's not going to work. And then what's going to get blamed?
It's got to be the pay.
Well, it'll be the pay or the team, right?
Yeah,
my guys just didn't work hard enough, or they didn't want it enough, those kind of things. And so we got to be careful of that.
Yeah. And thinking with that, Chris, I was even with, when you, that's why it's so, as an owner or a manager, you have to take your role so stinking serious and be diligent about getting all the information. You may have performance pay that says, you know what, I'm going to pay a guy X amount of money for running a service call, and me do the same thing. But what if your drive time, and let's say we're going to pay them the exact same time, and your drive time is 2 hours to calls, where mine's 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So we have to, and that's why so many people, they dive right into it. Oh my God. I love the way, I know that you guys as coaches, how you really walk people through the implementation of it, because if it's just like a foundation of a home. If you're not laying the foundation right, if you haven't done the plans right, if everything's not figured out, and then build that structure right, you can't just come in there and, throw the carpet on the slab. Things that's got to have been done way before that. So,
yeah. And, just personal stories, and I don't know about you, certainly share some if you got them, but for me as a tech, I was paid on probably every kind of pay plan you could think of. There's an endless number of them, but I was probably paid on a dozen different pay plans over my time in the field. And one of them was just like you're talking about, the drive time one, right? So I made $10 an hour, okay, as a service tech. I made $10 an hour, and then we had spiffs on certain things. But that was back in the days where you could just sell a condensing unit, right? So I was paid $10 an hour, but in an effort to cut down drive time and unapplied time, they called it, and increase overall billing efficiency, what they did was they said, we're going to pay you $5 to drive to a call. So every call you go to, you get $5. Then your hourly wage starts when you get there, and it's based on the time you check in and the time you check out from that call. Of course, back in those days, it was old radios and stuff, right? So you just had to rely on yourself and the dispatcher writing down the time, right? And so what I quickly figured out, and maybe some of you are already doing it, is if I drove over a half hour, I was losing money. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, what that was about a year, I think I was paid on that, and I was doing maintenance calls, as a matter of fact. So do you think I drove the speed limit everywhere I was going?
Never.
Do you think I might have gotten 2 accidents that year that weren't my fault?
Possibility.
Okay. So they weren't my fault technically, but I could have been a better driver. But those are unintended consequences. And I think that's a basic lesson of management of any kind, is that when you do something and you haven't thought it through, there's going to be unintended consequences you may not be able to come back from. But that was an unintended consequence of the one that I was on, because what did they do? They incentivized me to drive under a half hour, keep my drive time under a half hour. They didn't do that on purpose, but that's what happened. And so as such, and then the other side, the morale side, if they were sending me somewhere that was a 45-minute drive, I was thinking that I was giving up something. They were taking advantage of me. So as a tech, my mindset wasn't right because of that. And so, again, there might be some things like that are give and take, but that was just an example. Now, here's another thing, and this is that unintended consequences thing, is what are you going to have to manage?
Yep.
What's it going to be?
So the money that they saved on paying you guys, well, now they got to, get some sort of GPS or paying for accidents or hiring
increased insurance coverage.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. So, and here's the thing that my mantra when it comes to performance pay is not a substitute for management.
No.
And so when it comes to that, you got to know, what are you trying to manage before you put it in, right? Because whatever we incentivize, we're going to get, but what are we trying to manage? And then what new thing are we going to have to manage once we implement it? Mm-hmm. So a new thing that had to be managed from that company's perspective might have been the safe driving. Maybe that's what had to be managed now, because you were only paying me $5 to get to a call that's 45 minutes away. I'm going to make sure I get there as quick as I can, right? So now you have to manage that. But what are you trying to manage? And it goes back again to labor. Are you trying to manage labor? Performance pay is probably not what you need to do first, right? So you have to identify what you're trying to manage. And also, are you trying to change a behavior of some sort? And that's what they were trying to do with the $5 call thing, is change my behavior, or our behavior that thought, well, the guys are driving too much.
Well, and that's exactly what I can say for me that I hear and see is they're trying to make, their technicians sell more. They're trying to make them or trying to get them, maybe makes the wrong word, but they're trying to encourage them to sell more, or to, that's how the technician sees it anyways. Mm-hmm. And so now
Terry, you're not going to turn me into a salesman.
I've never heard that before. Never heard that one. So you're right. You just have to understand what is it. And that doesn't mean, so if you think about it from that viewpoint, and here again, Terry loves performance pay. So that's not what I'm saying. But if I put it into a service department to make them sell, or to get them to sell more product or add-ons or repairs or whatever it is, if I'm doing that, well, okay, could I not have trained better? Could I not have managed their day-to-day things, the calls? And literally, to me, it goes back to training most of the times. Now that's a whole nother podcast altogether, but truthfully, if you're trying to compensate for lack of training or lack of management, mm-hmm. you're already running down the wrong trail.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way. And I'm going to add that performance pay is not a substitute for a lack of training and a lack of management.
No.
It's not. So again, I have be careful what you wish for written down. I just circled it again because you just be careful what you wish for. If you put them on performance pay to try to control labor, first, it's not going to do what you think it's going to do, and you're going to end up managing something else in that. Now,
let me give you an example
yeah,
of
please do.
something on the opposite end of the spectrum. How many times do you talk to somebody about going to performance pay, and it probably is a good move for their company, but their comments are, well, then I'm going to have to worry about my guys selling things that people don't need. Well, okay, so let's just look at the big picture. So if what you told me is now you got to worry about somebody doing something unethical. Well, doesn't that go right back to, did you hire somebody that was unethical?
That's right. Well, and I agree with you. There's another layer to that, I think, which is, and I worked at a franchise company, and the guy who was the president there when I first went on 20 years ago, he used to have this saying that when you first hear it, it sounds pretty bad, but then you think about it, and he explains it, and you get it a little clearer. But he used to say, we don't hire thieves, we create them.
Yeah.
You ever heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
And so what he means is we don't hire people that are going to necessarily act unethical. But if we give them all of the tools and air quotes to do it, some people will. And so we just have to be careful. Number one, who we're bringing on the team. And number two, it's kind of like I go back to that how, and I'm not good with the text or addresses. I'm good with the ideas. But doesn't it say in the Bible somewhere you shouldn't cause your brother to stumble? Isn't that part of it? I don't know the address of that one. But as employers, if we put people in positions to stumble, we can't be surprised when they do.
No, we created the atmosphere. Absolutely.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about Chris and Terry's requirements for a good performance pay system. I'm going to give you the first one, and you said it. You got to have good management and good training in place before performance pay. Agree?
Yep. Absolutely. It's not going to fix. If you don't have those, you be careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
You might fix one thing, but you probably created 4 or 5 others.
Exactly. And I think that from the management, if you go even a little deeper on that, I think it's, have you given your people the opportunities and the tools to be successful with the performance pay? And then have you given them the training to maximize the opportunities and use the tools to be good and successful on the performance pay? If you haven't, your performance pay plan is going to fail. It's going to fail. Next, I just wrote this down. We're good, and you mentioned it, we're good with the carrot. We're good at dangling that carrot out there and having them go for that carrot. But you know what we stink at? The stick. We stink at the stick. And that doesn't mean, you got to be this harsh disciplinarian, but you can't always have it. So the only thing that can happen is a reward or nothing. It's either neutral or reward. You can't have that. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, well, they had a group of people there on the team that working internally that were supposed to be doing things kind of in between times of their primary role. Okay. So they were supposed to be answering the phone making outbound calls when they weren't answering the phone. But it was kind of a lull time for this particular company and the phones weren't ringing. And so they have cameras set up throughout the building for security and other reasons. And he was just watching on the camera and he was seeing that outbound calls were going down, in terms of the KPIs they were looking at. And so he decided, well, let me see what's happening here. Let me see how they're using their time. And what would happen is if he was in his office with his door closed and their supervisor was away from her desk, it was solitaire and texting. They were all on their phones. If his door was open, then they weren't doing that. They were making outbound calls. And so what happened was he's like, I don't understand why they're not doing this because they get X amount more if they do this, and it's not hard to do. They've got the opportunities here and that and the other thing. Well, what was happening was where they were paid was comfortable for them without doing any extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was they wanted a particular result, but it was extra to get that. It was extra. The reward was an extra reward for them. It wasn't the primary. And so, again, we talk about what are you trying to accomplish? Well, what you have to do there is you have to set it up so that you get what you're trying to accomplish as a consequence, or as because they're doing the work you want them to do. But what was happening here was we were given an incentive for something, and we didn't understand why nobody wanted to go for it. But there was no discipline if they weren't trying because of where they set up the pay structure. And so the pay was you got more if you did extra work. But, Terry, it's human nature that if you don't need more, are you going to try to get more?
No. And, you say the stick. It actually makes me wonder how many companies use performance pay as kind of that stick.
As a stick,
for
yes.
Performance, it's like, okay, yeah, we try to convince ourselves, well, we're doing this, because they're going to make more. But truthfully, sometimes it's, you know what, we don't want to hold them accountable, so we know they won't make enough money. So, well, they either have to leave, that's a whole nother story, or they'll start performing, so to speak. So, yeah that's our actual stick at times.
Yeah. And so I think you got to have a good carrot and a good stick when you put in performance pay. So there has to be consequences for not doing, because a lot of times, and this goes back to, it's not a replacement for management training, but don't you find that a lot of people put in performance pay and think it's a hands-off technique?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Put it in, tell everybody how excited they should be, and let it roll.
And then sink or swim. Right.
Yeah.
So we got to have good management training, good carrot and stick. And then the other things that I wrote down that I think always should happen in any kind of incentive program, whether it's primary, like performance pay, or if it's just some sort of spiff program, is it has to be easy to calculate, easy to understand. It's got to be very visible, and it has to be easy to track. Because one of the things that I can't stand is when I hear, and I get and if you train with me, you know that I've told you this many, 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 many times. You're a professional. Know your own numbers. Don't wait for Terry or the software to give it to you. Know your own numbers. And it's amazing to me sometimes when I see pay plans where people are making their living off of these numbers and they don't know them. And usually why they don't know them is because we're using a software product. I won't name any names because there's probably a dozen of them I can throw in this bucket where and Terry, you can fill in the blank in your head, but I have to put it in a spreadsheet because fill in the blank doesn't do it right. Meaning software. I export it to a spreadsheet and do what I do on it because name your software here doesn't do it that way. So I got news for you. If that's the case, it's too complicated. You need to get an easier number to track, or you need to figure out a way to put the data in your software so it comes out easily. But again, easy to calculate, easy to understand, visible, and easy to track.
And how many times do you see, because it's not easy or not easy to understand, I wonder how many companies that has some sort of performance pay, some sort of spiff program, whatever it is, that truly their team don't understand it, or certain people don't understand it. And we forget that they don't want to look stupid. So most times they won't ask us. And then, next thing you know, they're either not performing or they leave.
Yep.
And we find out later what that was all about. So, I mean, I guess I'm probably that guy that, I might oversimplify it because I just, to me, man, I don't want it to be complicated in the first place. And I dang sure want it to be something that's so easy that they can't help but get it.
And so when we say these things, we're talking to managers, but I want to talk directly to techs and salespeople, anybody who's on performance pay. If you are being paid on performance pay and you don't personally track the numbers for which you were paid, that makes absolutely no sense to me. No sense. Every job I've ever had where I've been paid a commission or a spiff on something or any kind of performance pay, what I want is I want my paycheck to come to me on the Friday or whenever it's supposed to come, and I'm going to compare it to my notes. And 50 out of 52 weeks, it's going to be exactly the same because I'm going to take the time. And maybe it's a little complicated. Maybe it's a little harder to get the numbers, whatever. Make the effort to do it. Why in the world would you leave that to somebody else? Why? Why would you leave it to a computer where 5 people are putting in the info and you don't know if all 5 of them are great at it? But you know what? You're supposed to go home to your family and say, this is how much I made, but I don't know how I made it. I don't know how to repeat this because I don't know what my numbers were.
You know, and we've talked about dispatching, you know, whether it's called dispatching profit, putting the right tech on the call, that type of stuff. Yeah. It's amazing how many guys come to the tech class. I will guarantee you it's at least 70% come there. And they have, I mean, you can say something simple. What's your average ticket? I don't know.
No clue.
What's your membership percentage closing rate? I don't know. You know, and what's amazing to me is how many of them think it's much greater than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand that. An example to me that I'll give you is, you might have heard me even say this before. My older son, you know, he's 29 now, but I remember when he was younger, I could always tell when I would come in to the house, if I came into the garage and he was meet me at the car with his report card, it was going to be good.
Yep.
If I had to come in the house, well, it was still good, but not as good. And the longer if I ever had to ask for it, I knew it wasn't good, right? So I remember.
Be careful what you ask for, Dad.
Yeah, I remember this scenario, and it gave me a management lesson when it comes to this. But I came in the garage. I knew it was report card day. You know, came in the garage, came in the house. You know, even sitting there, and okay, I'm like, all right, so it's not good. He's not going to present it to me willingly. So so I asked him. I said, "Hey, Mike, didn't you guys get report cards today?" And he said, "Oh yeah." Well, he goes upstairs, grabs his report card, brings it back down, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and I remember looking, and there was a grade on there, and this thinking, I mean, he had an F. I mean, he failed a subject, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and I'm sure my jaws are clenching and everything, Elmore, and so I'm not happy, and I look up at him, and I look back down, and I look back up at him, and I said. And as soon as I looked down again, I looked at his face and he said, I know, I'm just as shocked as you are. And I never, ever forget that. So here we are at the end of the grading period, at the end of the 9 weeks, and he's just as shocked as I am, right? I mean, he can't believe it. Oh, so those zeros on homework, those 50s on quizzes, all of that never gave you an indication that you were going to make an F.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, as management, just like in all reality, that was shame on him. But what about me as a father? At what point should I have known that he wasn't going the direction that he was supposed to? Because whether he was shocked, I doubt it. But how many times do guys go home every single day and not know if they won that day?
Exactly. And here's the crazy thing is, we do those advanced discover profiles. What percentage of your class, because I don't know when you guys are listening to this podcast, it's definitely going to be probably a couple weeks after, but we're recording this on the Friday before Terry is teaching the tech class in Austin. Now, you got 20 some odd guys in that class, Terry. What percentage of them will be economically motivated based on their advanced discover profile?
If I'm lucky, it would be 10%.
Okay, so that means that most techs inherently aren't economically motivated. They're more on the theoretical and regulatory side, aesthetic, altruist, and all that kind of stuff. So it's understandable maybe that you're not necessarily interested in the numbers, but for no other reason than this, and this is the other thing that I always tell people, is you're making your living off of different performance pay, but also somebody's making a decision about you based on those numbers.
Yeah.
Do you want it to be a surprise, or do you want to know exactly what's going on? So you need to know your numbers. But again, good management and training, carrot and a stick, easy to calculate, easy to understand, visible, and easy to track. And let's talk about, just real quick, Terry, let's talk about some types of performance pay, because there's literally hundreds of combinations. But I would say the most common ones I've ever heard of are straight commission, where you just get a percentage of sales. There's a flat rate where you get a flat amount for doing certain tasks and certain things. Like I $5 a drive to a call. If I did this, I got this much. Each task in my flat rate book had an amount I got paid to do it. Okay. That's a flat rate. Sometimes it's called piecework. Piecework is more, it was usually like an install type thing. If you put in a condenser, you got this much, an air handler, you got this much, a furnace, you got this much. And then there's hybrids of all that. There's unlimited number of hybrids where you can do those things. And here's the thing. I think the type of work you are doing will affect it. There's a better plan based on type of work than some others, right? Because here's what always happens with the performance pay. Hey guys, like I got a friend, another client and friend. Hey guys, I'm going to pay you 20% of all the calls you run. Okay, is that bad? I don't know. I'm not telling you a straight commission is bad, but what's the very first thing that comes out of the technician's mouth? What about maintenance calls?
Yep.
What about warranties? What about
Or if
callbacks?
they didn't say that to you, next thing you know, your membership conversions is like nothing.
Yeah.
And you wonder why. And it's because you give 10, 15, 20% discounts to your clients. And I ain't selling that. That means that's going to affect my money.
Right. And so what happens is, and again, those are the unintended consequences of things that happen when you do this. So that's why you have to make sure you've studied this in your business and you have answers to these questions. But when you do any commission-based thing, you're going to have what ifs. Well, you do any performance pay, you're going to have what ifs, right? Because even now, even if we go to straight hourly, what do we know? There's less what ifs than straight hourly, but there's a few. Do I get paid if I run my own callback? What if that happens? So you got to answer all the what ifs. But I would say that there are certain positions in a company, in a trades company, whether it's in sales or in the field doing different type of field work, whatever, that I think certain pay plans go better with. The only thing I would say is don't forget the loyalty someone shows to your company. Don't forget tenure. Don't forget the fact that there's technical skill involved and people and it's not always a direct correlation. If you get more knowledge, you make more money. If I go and learn all about geothermal heat pumps and I learn about that and then I do more geothermal heat pump calls, that doesn't mean I'm going to make a ton more money. There's not a direct correlation necessarily. So you need to remember in your pay plan, however you're going to do it, whether you're going to graduate it by commissions, junior techs get this percentage, senior techs get this, or you're going to have an hourly base that's adjustable, even if it's small, whatever. I think you got to consider all those things. Now, tell everybody, Terry, as much as you want to share, can share, what kind of performance pay do you use, and is it different for different positions, et cetera? Explain how you do things in your company.
Yeah, it's what I will say is a hybrid. Okay. But
that's fair.
It's kind of towards the task thing. So for example, they get paid for, like, if you go change a contactor and I go change a contactor, we're going to get paid the same to change that contactor.
Okay.
We also pay a flat fee for let's just say a maintenance call, that type of thing. We pay a guaranteed, we don't pay for a turn lead. We pay for a sold lead.
Okay.
And we pay 3% of that. It's what we have figured in. We also have different levels. So when you're talking about the tenure and the knowledge and all that, we have different levels of technicians that we have certain things in there. For example, a senior tech gets a couple of weeks vacation a year, some sick time, things like that. A regular technician gets less vacation time, and then a maintenance tech gets a lot less. And there's some requirements to get to that next level, not just how long you've been here, but you have some tests that you have to pass and that type of thing.
I like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you the thing that we've done different than a lot of companies that do the style pay that we do. Um, we've added another facet to it, and this is probably one of the reasons I say hybrid, is we understand the volatility,
Right.
the ups and downs, and that really is probably one of the things that keeps a lot of good technicians from coming to a.
Well, it kills a lot of pay plans on both sides because I was on a pay plan and we made a percentage of sales.
Yeah.
And then we had the what ifs and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. We had flat stuff on. And I remember when I was a tech, I was paid that way and I loved it. When I became a manager, I remember that I became a manager in November. We were running that pay plan. I just had come off of that and gone to a different pay for manager. I remember the following summer, the owner signing checks. He still signed the checks, signing the paychecks, going, why are we paying these guys so much? And he just abruptly pulled the pay plan that day and sent everybody back to hourly. Now, I wouldn't advocate that, by the way. But my point is where you see techs who like, well, man, I'm not going to make any money in the off season or the slow season. And they're not looking at the good stuff that can happen in the busy season. But owners are looking sometimes at the busy season and how much they're paying. They're not thinking about the slow season and the struggle.
Yeah. Well, what we've done with us, and this was a good bit of input from our guys too, is we've actually, depending on what level technician they are, they get a flat base pay.
Yeah.
That base pay, now here's where ours differs, is it's almost like if you could imagine, and I don't know how you feel about this, but it works good for us. We're kind of like the bank. So let's say that you're supposed to make 750 and you only make 600. Well, you get 750. But now that's 150 that you're kind of in the hole.
Yeah, it's like a draw almost.
Sir?
It's kind of like a draw.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you make, let's say you make 1,500 the next week. Well, okay, you're still 150 in the hole, so you get that 150 taken back out of it.
Yeah.
And typically, I mean, what that does is, is it keeps those dips on performance pay, because let's face it, you can have a bad week. You might even have a bad month, but shouldn't. But if you're training and managing and holding people accountable, you shouldn't. But so ultimately, we've kind of leveled that base or that bottom out.
Mm-hmm.
And it tends to help us keep our guys, and it definitely helps us with recruiting and that type of thing. But even greater, to me, it helps us with the culture and the morale, because, I mean, let's face it, if you worked, heck, let's just say, and it can happen, if you worked, all week and you're only going to take home $500, man, that, and especially if your bills require you to take home 1,000, that can be a challenge. I mean, that's going to affect morale and all that. So we've really given them an easy way to budget at least a base that they're going to make.
Yeah, and there's a couple of points that I want to reiterate that come out of that is, and I'm making this note right now, but when the challenge sometimes with a performance pay plan is you don't think of, like I said, loyalty and tenure, and then retention and recruiting.
Yeah,
because sometimes it's hard. Inherently, if a tech has never been paid a performance pay plan, they don't understand how it works. And even if they were paid one on somewhere else, they know the pitfalls of that one, but they don't know if yours has those. So it's still kind of at the same point. You've got to make sure they understand it well. But one of the things that I realized that we had to do was we had to educate our guys on how to handle the money sometimes, or provide them with something like you're talking about, which is a way to kind of raise the valleys, so to speak. We don't want to flatten the hills, and we want to raise the valleys if we can in a fair way. Because here's the thing: we can call it performance pay all we want, but there's a bit of what somebody does that we just need a body to do, and it's fair for there to be some allowance for the body doing that. And then really what it is it's not, if you think about it, performance pay, we're thinking when someone gives a performance, we think they're doing something extra, right? So I still think that whether you can accomplish this even with a straight commission pay plan, right? So I'm not saying there's got to be an hourly component, or even that I like what you're doing with that, with helping your guys out. And that's really what it comes down to is, but just two more points and then we'll end it. But, and you mentioned this when we were talking preliminary to coming on and recording. And I'm going to basically say this in the way I know how to say it. Don't forget mama.
Yep.
Right. I know we're still in a predominantly male trade, whatever, but don't forget the significant other at home.
That's right.
Because I think too often we have retention issues because the spouse doesn't understand the pay, and it's natural for us to want to maybe paint a rosy picture about work sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we go home and we explain a pay plan, and we do the same thing that managers and owners might do, which is here's all the upside to it, but no, I don't want to tell you about the downside. Mm-hmm. And so even to the point of in a recruiting process that we talk about in our management class, which is going on next week after Terry's tech class, we talk about recruiting and hiring. And in that, I always recommend when you make the offer over lunch with the tech and spouse, or over dinner with tech and spouse, because you want to meet the spouse, but you always want to make that offer there so they understand. And so if you're going to launch a pay plan, here's a couple more things to add. But just a quick review. With your performance pay, what are you trying to accomplish? What results do you expect? Can you provide the opportunities for your people to be successful? What are you trying to manage, and what are you going to have to manage after you put it in place? So think through all those questions, and then make sure you have good management and training, because you got to give your people the tools to be successful with it. Make it easy to calculate, easy to understand, visible, easy to track. And you're offering the carrot. Don't forget the stick, the disciplinary part of it if they're not doing something. And then test it. Now, Terry, I don't know what you did with yours, if you just ran some stuff on paper or whatever and then implemented, or if you spent time testing it. But I was talking to a guy yesterday, and what he's going to do is he's going to go back and look at previous pay periods from 2019 and apply the performance pay to those pay periods. And he's going to run several in the summer, several in the slow season, several in the winter, to see what the numbers look like. Again, and that's helping him determine what he's going to have to manage and what he's going to get. So did you do anything like that, Terry?
Yeah, almost exactly what you just described he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I understand that when you're talking about people's pay, that's serious. I mean,
yeah.
There's some things I don't mind surprises, but my pay is not one of them,
No.
especially if it's ever on the lower side. I'll add to what you just said, and this is just something that you see happen. Don't insult the experienced technician with your pay either.
Mm-hmm.
Don't. He's got to. He is a good technician. And typically, if you think about the way he's probably been paid in the past, it's, the more experience, the more certifications I get, the more I'm going to make. Mm-hmm. Well, next thing you know, there's this guy that's been doing it 6 months making as much as him. And so
that's the loyalty and tenure thing I was talking about, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got to just at least, and I'm not saying, there again, I understand why you would do all of them, but it still goes back to, you've got to make sure that you're putting the things, the work into the things so that they see that mm-hmm. potential. And it's not just that rosy picture.
Right.
So I can't stand somebody just putting something in place because, well, it works for this person right. over here, this company over here.
Yeah, and that's why you got to test it. So look back at previous pay periods. Don't just do one tech. Do several different levels of techs to see what the impact will be.
Exactly.
And one of the things I always recommend is you run it concurrently. So start calculating it now, with the current stuff, in addition to looking back, and see where it's at. When you launch it, have a general meeting for the people who are affected by it, which means technicians and significant others. And do it in the evening so it can happen that way. Don't do it during the day. Do it if you have to, do it on a Saturday. After kids' soccer or whatever, do it on a Saturday. But make it happen so that you roll it out to everybody who is affected by it, which is your techs, anybody who's paid that way, and the significant other that is going to be doing it. Let them decide if that's something they should do or not. But you're going to facilitate and make it available. And if they don't want to bring their significant other, that's up to them.
And
go ahead.
Chris, I was going to say too, if you do roll out some sort of pay structure, performance pay, whatever we want to call it, don't forget to remember. I mean, always understand that that's not what all your competitors are doing, and you've got to compete against that, because when they're going to steal your employees, if you're on some sort of performance pay, is the slow seasons. So don't forget. I heard, one of the guys say in one of our meetings about, monthly, go over what their hourly would have been.
Yeah.
That way they're being reminded.
Absolutely.
The beauty to me of performance pay, and why I personally wouldn't work on anything else than some sort of performance style, is because I believe in my performance, but I don't want there to be a cap on what I can make.
Exactly.
I don't want the industry to put a cap on me.
Absolutely. And so again, we go back to, that's why it's important to know your own numbers so you can have that confidence, right? But in addition to looking back at previous periods, testing on different techs, run it concurrently, have that meeting and invite the spouses, have it at a time where they can attend, and provide childcare if you need to, whatever. But also run it concurrently after you launch it. Give a time period where you'll pay whichever's more, the hourly pay they made or the new commission structure or performance pay structure. So make sure there's a timeline. Announce it. Give it a couple of weeks before it starts. Let it start. Run it concurrently with hourly pay. Whichever is more is what you get. And announce the date it's going to change to only performance pay. If you can remember to do half the things, and I got the show notes. I'm going to make sure this is up for you to download. And this has been a little bit longer podcast than we normally do, because we felt like this is a very important topic. And we feel like we have the experience to help with this because we've been there and done that. We've been paid this way. I don't know about you, Terry, but I've made some crazy mistakes doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't have help.
Yeah, you're talking about even with when we did the install pay. I mean, I ran it together. We set the time. I think it was 3 months. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was 3 months. And I said, I'll pay you the greater of the two. And within the first month, unanimously, they're like, nope, we know what we want. And, never looked back. Matter of fact, I think if I ever mentioned hourly to them, they would kill me.
Well, hopefully you got a lot of good nuggets out of this. I think you did. I'm pretty confident you did, because none other than Terry Barrett was here with us, which that should be enough for everybody. But you can always get in touch with us. You know how to get in touch with me. I'm Elmore at servextra.com, servextra.com, or my phone number is 254-733-7109. You can also go to our website, servextra.com. You can see all about our these other podcasts we have. You can see our next class times and those kind of things. We've got another class coming up in March. Go to the website, check that out. Terry, how can people get in touch with you to learn more about what you're doing at Air Now?
Well, cell number is 334-799-2020. And then they can shoot me an email, which is Terry, Terry, at airnow, AIRNOW,
Okay. So, Terry, how long have you been working with SET?
8 years, maybe.
So other than Todd and Shannon, you and your wife, Stacy, are probably the most qualified to answer the question I'm getting ready to ask you.
Okay.
What do we do at SET, Terry?
We turn learning into earning.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Bye, everybody.